So it's our real pleasure to have three PR leaders here today. And at AMEC, we never underestimate the importance of leaders evangelizing, encouraging their staff, their peers to take up measurement. So we'll hear the thinking of three leaders and how their companies have upped their game to move from measurement to insights. I'd refer you to the biographies book that you have rather than me explain who everyone is. So let's welcome, bang on time, our first speaker of the 6th International Summit, Kevin Murray, Chairman of the Good Relations Group.
Thank you, Barry. Good morning, everybody, and goeiemorgen. Those of you who are Dutch will recognize that actually wasn't Dutch. That was Afrikaans, because I originate from South Africa, and it was the closest I could get to Dutch. Lekker, yes, exactly. Very, very pleased to be here this morning. Research and evaluation has been close to my heart for 40 years now in my career, and I'm a huge admirer of everything you do, and I have been a huge consumer of everything you do as well in all of the different guises that I've had over my career as Director of Communications for Bayer, for the Atomic Energy Authority, for British Airways, and then leading our consultancy and doing the public relations work we do for all our clients. Again, a huge advocate for measurement and evaluation. But one of the questions that I keep getting asked by the clients that I deal with myself is a slightly different question, because they're asking me a lot about something that they call future value. And future value is exercising them tremendously, because, of course, what all of them is trying to do is build the future value of their businesses, the future capital value, the future value to customers, and the ability to be sustainable businesses. And that's what was on our minds at the Good Relations Group when we started thinking about how do we up our game and move to consider this question of value when value clearly isn't where it used to be. Now, I celebrated my 60th yesterday. I know that will be impossible for you to conceive of because I look so young, but I did. And my daughter gave the most wonderful speech wherein she revealed all sorts of things to my friends that I would rather they didn't know. But one of them was that she told them that I have data OCD. So I'm obsessed with data. And I have found data to be absolutely invaluable throughout all the jobs I've had. But before I tell you about the data and the research we're doing, I want to tell you about a little story that has really focused us on how we up our game and why we're upping our game in the way that we are. And it all starts one Sunday night in January when I'm at home, I'm settling down to watch some television, and this precious daughter of mine, I thought, was on a plane to Singapore to go and see a friend and to attend the wedding of this friend. And her two children, my grandchildren, are safely in bed when, as I'm watching television, I get a text on my telephone. And the text says, "Daddy, are you there?" So I respond, and I'm puzzled because I'm thinking I thought she was on a plane. And I said, "Yes, what's up?" And she responds by saying, "We've had an emergency. The plane has made a descent 30,000 feet, oxygen masks, pilot looking for a place to land. Please tell my babies that I love them." What do you do? I'm shocked. I'm in a state. I'm trying not to panic. I text her back, and I say, tell me more. She texts again. She says, "It looks like the pilot is trying to head towards Baku, and we're dumping fuel." Straight away, I know that this is not a Mayday, because I was Director of Communications for British Airways. I worked with Emirates Airline for years, and one of our biggest clients now is Airbus, so I know a little bit about aviation. So I know it's not a Mayday, but it is still an emergency. And she then says on the text, that should take half an hour. But in the meantime, I've sent you an email. In the email is a photograph, and it's a photograph of her with the oxygen mask on, and down the plane, everybody else with oxygen masks on. Now, you can imagine how I felt. And now she then says, half an hour, I have to turn my phone off, I'm running out of battery. Worst half an hour of my life. She lands, texts me back, we're down on the ground, she said, safely, and of course, massive relief from my point of view. And the next stage of her adventure begins as they unpack a A380 in Baku that isn't able to cope with that many passengers on any one day, let alone from one plane load. But here's the point of the story. The person who took the photograph of her and that she sent to me by email, and by the way, the reason she was able to do this was because the plane had Wi-Fi. The person who had taken the picture, as they landed, he had 7 media interviews lined up. And her picture was all over the world in an instant. And it struck home to me how instant news is today, how even as it's happening, the news is out there and being reported on. Even as you are involved in the issue, things are going on, things are developing. And one of the things that it led me to doing a lot of research on was this insight from Dame Amelia Fawcett, who chairs the Guardian Media Group, where she said, in this kind of world, most of the communications are not fit for purpose when we're operating at this sort of speed and under these sort of conditions. We're in a new world of transparency where we're under constant scrutiny, perpetual communication is the state of play, we're constantly being challenged. The name of the game is speed. And we face potentially instant reputational ruin. And of course, in these circumstances, billions of pounds can be wiped off the value of a company in an instant. And therein lies a significant clue, because the clue is why? Why does all that money, why does all that value disappear? And it's because value isn't where it used to be. Don't strain your eyes trying to read the text on this slide. I'm going to explain this more later. This is just to illustrate a point, which is that tangible assets today are worth less than intangible assets. This is a reversal of value in the last 10 years. Research currently says that the total value of all listed companies all over the world is somewhere around $60 trillion. And of that, $35 trillion is made up of intangibles. So here's my case. I think that what we do is a lot more valuable than we argue. I question whether we're always measuring the right things. And if we aren't measuring the right things, where should we be looking? And on that basis, how do we actually, therefore, up our game? I also believe firmly that reputation comes from what you do, how you engage with stakeholders, and whether they are inclined to recommend you. And in every job I've ever had, working with whatever company I've ever had, those have been the things I've always been keen to look at. So yes, of course, we measure media. Of course, we measure social media. Of course, we measure as much as we can and every aspect of the things that we need to do. And over the years, I've come to realize that you need research for benchmarking, you need research for insight, and you need research for evaluation. And the big trick is there any form of research in which you can combine all 3 of those things to enable you to have the insights that power the progress of your clients? When I was researching my first book, The Language of Leaders, I spoke to 70 leaders from a wide range of global companies and managed to interview chairmen and CEOs of all these organizations. And one of the people I spoke to was Paul Polman, chief executive of Unilever, who said to me that the intangible value of Unilever was £60 billion, and that it was his job to maintain and protect that intangible asset, which was largely about trust. fixated by this idea of intangible assets, I then did a lot more research for my second book, Communicate to Inspire, in which I looked at this question of intangible assets. And I came across quite a lot of research around what actually are intangible assets. And they are things like skills and competencies, knowledge, culture and values, relationships and trust, leadership and communication itself, and of course, reputation. And when you think about that, every one of those things is powered by excellence in communication. So communication is critical to business success. And the big question mark is, what are we communicating? How are we communicating? And are we communicating the right things in the right way at the right time to the right people? I believe that the greatest value in all of those intangibles is in the area of reputation and relationships and trust. And the thing that has been fixating us is how do we take all that and up our game as the Good Relations Group in the work that we do with clients? Because if we do believe that this issue of trust is driven by, are you seen as a good company and as a force for good? Do people believe that you'll do the right thing? Do they feel that you engage with them in the right way? And do they feel enough faith in you to recommend you to the people that they hold dear to them? And the question that was on our minds was, how would you actually take a view on measuring that? So we decided to do some beta research. And last year we undertook a huge research exercise, which we called Triple G: good action, good engagement, good recommendations, 3 Gs. And it was, slightly jokingly, the other side of a triple A rating, which is all about your financial worth, and a triple G rating was about your future worth. Because our concept was that if you got all these things right, it would say more about your ability to deliver future value and a sustainable business than anything else that you were doing. Because locked up in your ability to grow is your relationships and whether or not those relationships will help you to grow. So we went out and we did this research looking at 4,000 consumers across the UK, 100 brands, and we asked them a lot of questions around the 3 Gs. The first, of course, was around the good actions, the next was around good engagement, and the next was around whether or not they were prepared to, likely to recommend. And when we did this, we looked at the big brands and we explained to people, when we're talking about Diageo are responsible for these products, so that every time the consumers would recognize what that huge corporation actually represented in their own lives. From there, we then drilled into and asked them a lot of questions around the concept of good actions. Were these organizations in the minds of the people that they were selling product to thought of in the right way? Were they doing the right thing? Were they socially responsible? Were they environmentally responsible? And the ultimate test was, do you trust this company to make the right decisions even when you're not in the room? From there, we went on to ask about whether or not these people engaged with them. And we wanted to move away from the concept of communication and messaging into whether or not these people actually felt a sense of warmth towards the brands, wherein on a scale of personification, would they actually welcome these brands into their homes? And asked them a series of questions around that. And then on the issue of good recommendations, we used traditional Net Promoter Score on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend these brands. When we then put that all together, we were able to look at the brands and look at those companies who managed to get a triple G rating, the best of the best in each of those 3 categories. And also we were able to look at the brands that only got 1 G or 2 Gs. And more importantly, we were able to dig into the verbatims of all these consumers to understand why. Why was it they only got 1 G or 2 Gs? Why did they get 3 Gs? What were the best doing that the others were not? And what insights did that give to the people who had not got a triple G or had only got one G, who had got no Gs, that enabled them to think about what they had to do to get to a triple G rating. The results were extremely interesting and attracted a lot of attention and obviously some controversy as well. The companies that got triple Gs were from a variety of sectors, which I'll walk you through in a second. But there were some surprises in there from companies that earned a triple G who you might have considered would probably not have. And there were companies not there that you would have thought would have got a triple G rating based on what you read about them in the media. You could predict this, I guess, but across the sectors, you got the different ratings, and of course, financial services didn't do very well at all, nothing unpredictable there. But one or two of the brands in the financial services sector shone. And we were able to drill into the verbatims to understand why were they getting such good ratings when all of the others were not. Now, as I said, that research was very much beta research. And we knew at the time that it was a trial, and it was a big play. It was a big bet by us because it was very expensive. But it was taking us in a whole new direction. It was one that was driven by our customers, our clients, because when I sat down with the chief executives of the brands and companies that we represent, they were very concerned, not about the issue of how well were they being portrayed in the media. They were more concerned about how likely are we to be able to succeed into the future? And what is it that's going to determine our success going forward? And the answer to that question absolutely lies in the concept of intangible assets. When you start looking into this whole question of tangible and intangible assets, what you find is that the more you use tangible assets, the less value they have. The more you leverage intangible assets, the greater value they have. So we're moving into a world where intangible assets are going to count for a lot more in wealth creation, and they're things we're going to have to be measuring and monitoring even more. The biggest things that we've learned in doing this research, the first, of course, is the value of benchmarking the very best, and the value of benchmarking where brands are now. Because, of course, we're going to do this research over and over again, and we're going to be able to use the first year's research as benchmarking. The biggest value has come from the insights that it's given us, because what we've been able to do is drill into the verbatims to compare and contrast companies within the same sectors, companies across sectors, different kinds of brands, whether they're high street brands or whether they're online brands, and come to a view on whether there are differences that enable them to learn across these different platforms, across these different sectors that will help all of the brands. And then, of course, it's all about evaluation, because we're able to look at this now, take action, and see whether the action delivers a result in terms of an improvement against the triple G rating that they've got. Because this was so successful, we have put our money where our mouth is, and we have just completed round 2 of this research, which this time went to 12,000 consumers and involved 120 brands. Now, as you might imagine, this 12,000 consumers who are able to give verbatims and comment on all of these brands is a huge amount of information. And we're still busy trying to process all that information now. But it's our very strong belief that this is a fantastically powerful way to measure and evaluate, and we are currently doing a B2B version of this as well. And we also believe that it has merit and is potentially able to be adapted into public sector and charitable evaluation as well. So in terms of what it's done for us as an agency, it's done a huge amount. We're the only PR group to have achieved the cover of Marketing Week and a huge, I think it was 6-page spread inside. So it generated a lot of coverage for us, which was really important to us at the time, because the Good Relations Group is really only 2 years old. And so we needed to create presence, we needed to help people to understand what we do, and we especially needed to be able to get into conversations with clients to talk with them about how we could help them. So it has delivered us huge additional revenues because it's enabled us to get into many more conversations with clients because we're able to bring them insights that no other research has ever shown them. And in fact, sometimes the research that we're showing them absolutely, contrasts with the research they already have. So there's loads of arguments when we take this research to them, but the value really isn't in the absolute numbers. The value is in the gaps between what they say and what this research is saying and what the best are doing. So it's provided the level of insight that has helped us enormously to help clients direct their efforts to build intangible asset value, which is the name of the future game. So we will continue to do this research, and we will continue to look into finding ways to drive more insight, while at the same time benchmarking and evaluating as well. So for your time and attention, thank you very much, and I'll throw us open to questions.
We have a microphone at the front, please. Thank you. When anyone has a question, it would help if you just raise your hand, let us know who you are.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Kevin. Jeremy Thompson, Chief Executive of Gorkana Group and AMEC Chair-elect. I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak a number of times. Every time I hear you, I think how enlightened the Good Relations Group seems to be. You're doing some wonderful work, and what I would ask of you, I'd slightly put you on the spot, I guess preempt the session that we're going to have following this, but what can AMEC do to help? Do you want us to help? How do you want to engage with the media intelligence industry? What can we all be doing to standardise approaches to measurement, to encourage more large organisations to measure the effectiveness of their PR programmes?
That's a really good question, and yes, I would love for us to be aiming more in the same direction. I think I would ask you to search a bit harder and not accept same old, and look for new and inventive ways to really look at measurement that provides value. I was very struck. A number of years ago, I did some research with Professor John White, and we went to interview a number of chief executives, asking them about how important they felt evaluation was in public relations. And the answer that came back was, we don't really care, we know it's important. And we think that you care because if you can prove it's worth a lot of money, you'll charge us more. So they, as CEOs and leaders, got the importance of what we do, and they didn't need proof of it. So at the very highest level, I think the idea of evaluation isn't so important, but the idea of insight is critically important. And so I would suggest the way to start looking about this is how do we move more towards real insight that can drive decision-making at the top table? And I have to admit, in part by accident, but in part because we were prepared to experiment and take some bets, we've stumbled across something that has been tremendously important because it fuels decision-making at the top table. And that's the issue.
Thank you. One microphone at the back, please. Thank you.
Thomas Stöckler from WCG. Quick question. How do you turn your data evidence and your insight into actual help for those companies that, with regard to your 3Gs, are lagging behind at this point in time?
It's a good question. The first thing we do is for every client, we do a bespoke report. And that obviously has different levels. We first do an introductory report because the clients may not be paying us for it. If we can interest them sufficiently through the teaser report, we can then deep dive and do a much more detailed report for them off the back of the data. And they can ask us to explore different aspects of the verbatims. But you might imagine with 12,000 consumers, all of whom are commenting on every one of the questions, that can take quite a lot of work. But we do then do a report which says, here's how you're currently rated, here's how you rank against your peers, here's where you are underperforming against the leaders in each of the categories, here's what consumers are saying about why, here's how some top performers in other sectors are, what they're doing, and this may give insight to you to think about doing things differently that you haven't tried before yourselves. So very bespoke reports that we take to them. What's starting to happen is that some of the clients are then asking us to go away and do some even deeper research to further pursue the questions that we asked in this top-line research.
What we'll do, we'll leave questions for there. You'll have another opportunity with Kevin when he returns for the panel shortly. But thank you, Kevin, for kicking us off. Thank you.